Let's go live now to George Washington University Assistant Professor of Economics, Stephen Hamilton. Stephen, thanks for your time. There was no hike yesterday, but that was a pretty blunt message sent by the governor.
Yeah, g'day, Kieran. I can't really recall a tougher message sent by a governor, certainly since Michelle started, all the way back to Phil Lowe, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. You have to go back to see something so tough. So, they're very reluctant to raise rates. That was clear. They were looking for any excuse not to raise rates. And as we said on this program, the CPI coming in line with their forecast gave them all of the excuse they needed to hold. But when you dig into the statement, they released a whole lot of forecasts and a whole lot of analysis. They're not forecasting to achieve their inflation target before 2027, right? That's 3 years away before inflation is due to hit the midpoint of their target range. And, in that circumstance, to have inflation coming down so slowly, to have demand still be so strong, to have inflation having flatlined for the past 7 months, it's very difficult for them to justify holding. And I think it wouldn't take a lot from here to get an increase.
Now, it's interesting. You said we drill into it and look at the numbers, and it shows that they're going to hold for a fair while. But if we drill into the message as well, it was not just to economists, the markets, but to some in the government too that might have been thinking or hinting that a rate cut could be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, look, Anthony Albanese appointed Michelle Bullock to her position. She's the governor. At the end of the day, the governor is a political position, right? It's appointed by politicians, and she's there at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. So, she has to be very careful with what she said. And she just about did, backflips trying to not say the government spending is pushing up inflation. In that package just now, you heard her say something that doesn't make any sense at all, which is public demand is higher. It's being offset by reductions in other areas. Well, of course it is. But what if that public demand was lower? Then demand overall would be lower, inflation would be lower, and interest rates would be lower. And in the statement, in the document, it's much clearer that government spending, including the energy rebates and other measures that the government is taking, are putting significant upward pressure on inflation, right? The last forecasts in May have been radically revised. The date that inflation reaches target has been pushed out 6 months or more. And what's happened between now and then? The federal budget and a whole lot of state and other government budgets. So, I just think when we look at the whole picture, people like me, I'm not the only one, other economists have been saying for years that the government is working at cross purposes to the RBA, and the RBA has finally admitted it.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Stephen, do you think, and you're a professor of economics, and I know that you look at the numbers, supply and demand, and it's all done in that manner, but sometimes the message does matter as well, doesn't it? Because it affects people's behaviour. So if you know that this is a hard slog right now, and people are struggling with cost of living, and the governor says, well, you're not getting any relief for at least the rest of this year, does that have behavioural impact?
Yeah, we call it open mouth operations, right? So not open market operations, but open mouth operations. What the RBA governor, without touching interest rates, can come out and lower what we call the tightness of financial conditions. Right, because if the RBA governor comes out and says that rates will fall in future, the market responds to that, and bond yields fall, and in general the cost of borrowing falls. So they can have an immediate impact. So what the governor says, is extremely important, and that's why they choose their words incredibly carefully. Now, with this sort of market turmoil overseas, as well as a slightly softer unemployment figure that came out of the US last week, we had markets in Australia updating pretty aggressively to put a 100% probability that the RBA would cut rates this year in calendar 2024. Now, I thought that was crazy. Michelle Bullock obviously thought that was crazy too, because at her press conference, she was crystal clear that the board's current position is that they will not cut rates at any point in the next 6 months. Now, of course, that can change, but she could not have been clearer that the board is on hold for a long time. And if anything, is looking to raise rates if any piece of information comes in that pushes them over the line. So I think the message from her was incredibly strong, both in terms of the inflation outlook and some messaging around the kind of government spending side.
Indeed. Professor Stephen Hamilton, great to get your insights as always from George Washington University.